Now, aid has also been trickling into neighboring Syria. The first plane load from Saudi Arabia landing in the city of Aleppo earlier today. Yesterday, the United Nations said Damascus had agreed to reopen 2 new border crossings from Turkey to Syria to let aid in.
Rescue phase and is dragging live people out from the rubble and finding those who died in the rubble. That's coming to a close. And now the humanitarian phase, the urgency of providing shelter, psychosocial care, food, schooling, and a sense of the future for these people. That's our obligation now.
We can now bring in Rula Amin, UNHCR Spokesperson for the Middle East and North Africa. Thank you very much for joining us here on France 24 today. What are you hearing from your teams on the ground? Is aid reaching areas of northwestern Syria that is the hardest hit?
It's reaching some people in the areas worst hit. It's not reaching all people as needed yet. As you have explained, there has been only one entry to bring in aid from Turkey into northwest Syria, and of course that is never enough when you have such a strong earthquake striking and in an area where some of the most vulnerable Syrians live. And they're vulnerable because many of them had been displaced before. About 3 million of the people who live in northwest Syria are displaced, and they had been living in tents, weak structures, maybe sometimes already damaged buildings and destroyed, partially destroyed. 4 million people living in northwest Syria depend on humanitarian assistance to survive. This was before the earthquake. So you can imagine, after the earthquake, the needs must have multiplied. And the needs are not only for search and rescue efforts, but as you had explained, it's also to provide food, shelter, water, sanitation, some sense of security as well, because some, even if their buildings and homes did not collapse, they feel they are at a risk of collapse since the structure was weak initially anyway.
Rula, you mentioned that one border crossing yesterday. Authorities in Damascus approved the reopening of 2 more border crossings from Turkey to Syria. Can you confirm that those 2 are in fact open and are operational?
I still can't confirm that they are operational today, but the Secretary General of the United Nations already declared that they will be operational and trucks will be going through there very soon. Now, I'm not at that border. I'm in Damascus, and I just returned from Aleppo, where we also saw the huge needs. We saw a lot of pain. We saw people in shock, traumatized. This earthquake really brought an emergency on top of all the emergencies that Syrians had been living for the past 12 years. The needs are growing by the day. With every day unfolding is the number of and the scope of the losses in lives, the losses in infrastructure, in homes destroyed, hospitals, schools, even the sources of safe water to drink are at risk. So the job to help these people and support them in the next stage is not just a 1-week job. It's not for 2 weeks. It's a long term. We will need months and months to help people recover and be able to restart again. As you know, what we saw was many people who had been displaced before had lost their homes. Many people in Aleppo were now at makeshift shelters in mosques, in hospitals, in mosques, in schools. Some did not have a space. There was no space for them there. They were sleeping in cars. Some were sleeping in parks. It's really a very crushing thing to witness.
I want to talk about some of the criticisms the UN has come under in terms of the pace at getting emergency aid to northwestern Syria, because the first convoy, I believe, reached on Friday, and according to Syria's White Helmets, it was a planned convoy already before the earthquake, which had blankets. What is your response to the emergency aid being slow to enter northwestern Syria?
It's a question with many layers, because initially and at the start, of course, people who had been hit by an earthquake, their needs are immense and they want help and they deserve help, and the world should have stepped in quicker and with more assistance very quickly. However, we have to also recognize the challenges. One is that the combination of the earthquake and a snowstorm, a very severe snowstorm that hit the region on the same day, blocked many of the roads, and the earthquake had actually damaged the main road that going into northwest Syria, with all the trucks and the trailers using it to bring in relief. But however, it's also important to note that UN agencies like UNHCR, like UNICEF, like WFP, they already had pre-positioned relief items inside northwest Syria, which was distributed by the partners we had on the ground while the road was being fixed for 2 days. Was it enough? Of course not. Was it near enough? It was not. The earthquake had left many people homeless, many people without shelter, many people in the rain and the snow. So the aid, they needed a lot of support, and that support did not come as fast as it should. Now, it's not a matter of a decision. There were many decisions, many issues. Another issue is that the situation on the ground in Syria, politically and security-wise, is very complicated. And that's why there was only one border crossing. And that's why we had been advocating and calling on all stakeholders to put politics aside and to really drop all political considerations and focus on how we can assist these people to bring in aid as fast as possible to as many people as possible. One entry point was not enough, and that's why there was all this work to try to bring in more aid through other entry points.
Indeed. Rula, I want to jump in there because you said that the needs are so great. They were great before the earthquake struck, and now they're obviously even greater now. What you've traveled to the regions that have been hit. What sense do you get of what people need in not now and in the weeks to come?
Well, definitely those who lost their homes or afraid, or their homes had become unsafe, they need shelter. They need food. They need water. They need to be able to warm their children. You know, the people we saw yesterday in Aleppo, it was freezing. It was so cold, sub-zero, and they were sleeping in the parks. You can imagine how cruel that was and how brutal. People also were traumatized. They are still scared that there will be another earthquake after all the aftershocks that they felt. So they have a lot of immediate needs. But as I said, the earthquake will have long-term impact on their lives. And that's why we are calling on the international community to support them and not to forget about them after 1 week when there's another crisis or another emergency coming up somewhere else. We need to stay committed to those people. And hopefully, this will be also a reminder that they have been suffering for the past 12 years, paying the highest price for 12 years of crisis. And maybe we need to really focus now on finding a solution, an end to this, not just to alleviate or try to mitigate the impact of the earthquake and the crisis on them, but to give them solutions so they are not as vulnerable, so that they can really protect their children. They can put food on the table. They can send their children to schools.
Indeed.
This is what they need. It was really painful to see them outdoors, again, displaced after so many years of being displaced. Some of them had just come home and now they lost it again.
Rula Amin, thank you very much for joining us on the program today. Appreciate it.